Hey everyone, it's Christian from The Gamer, and in this Arc Raiders video, we'll be going over everything you need to know about the latest 1.17 patch. We'll be detailing all the changes to weapons, go over the item crafting nerfs, as well as the various bug fixes, UI improvements, and more. Last, we'll also be giving some of our thoughts on the overall update as we work our way through the patch notes in detail. Without further ado, let's get into the video. First, the latest patch came in addition to the Shrouded Sky update. If you want a full breakdown of that update, we have a separate video covering each of the new content additions, which you can check out on our channel. Nonetheless, I'm still curious to know what you think of the Hurricane map condition and the new arc, as not everyone thinks the update is all that substantial. Right, so it's been a couple of days since the latest patch. A lot of us have gotten some hands-on with the game since the update, so I'm sure you have opinions as well. And it seems like overall reactions have cooled, particularly around the weapon balancing and crafting changes. I know I saw a lot of chatter that this patch was going to push more people toward playing Marathon, but really I just don't think that's going to be the case. So let's jump into the patch notes, starting with the highlights for what you can expect in the video before diving deeper into each section. The highlights are what Embark considers some of the biggest changes brought with the 1.17 patch, but as we'll see in the actual details of the patch notes, there are some particular things people are very concerned about. There are weapon balancing changes for the Stitcher, the Kettle, the Venator, the Jupiter, and the Aphelion. They also added a piano as an interactable object in the world, prevented enabling all NVIDIA Freestyle filters simultaneously to remove an unfair visual advantage. Feats can now be rerolled 3 times per day for free, removed PvP feats, and updated a few existing feats and added a few new ones. Ziplines can no longer be placed on carryable objects. Mines, traps, or remote flares can no longer be placed on other deployables. Right, so let's go ahead and jump into weapons. Now, one of the most important things that we have to note is that there's a big change to weapon behavior. In one of the latest patches, the 1.13 update, Embark made some changes to semi-automatic weapons. What they found is that there was an inadvertent shadow buff, which impacted their weapon input buffers. Embark says on this, where you previously would have to time your inputs to the intended cadence of a weapon to reach its full potential, you could now instead spam click the button, effectively bypassing any skill requirement to learn the weapon's cadence. We want to keep some of that skill expression, but we also recognize that what we had previously didn't feel very responsive. To address that and land in some sort of middle ground, we have since added more levers for us to control the weapon input buffering window on a gun-to-gun basis, and we've adjusted the semi-automatic weapons accordingly. The weapon should now still be more responsive to fire when spam clicking, but the players who choose to pace their shots will see better results. I think the most effective demonstration of this weapon input buffer was actually the Venator, where back when it was severely OP, you could spam click, left click, or right trigger to essentially mag dump into enemy players. When in reality, Embark wanted a faster fire rate for players who mastered the cadence of the weapon every time it fell back down after a shot recoil. There should be more of a middle ground in that regard. The other big changes to weapons comes with balancing, specifically with the low-end and the high-end weapons. The Stitcher got its headshot multiplier reduced from 2.5 down to 1.75, its base damage reduced from 7 down to 6.5, and its increased per-shot dispersion by around 50%, making it bloom significantly faster once you start shooting. This is probably a good update, as the gap between Stitcher and Bobcat specifically, I think, was far too narrow. Essentially, the Stitcher could compete against the Bobcat and was significantly less expensive to craft a Stitcher 4 than it was to be competing with a Bobcat level 4. Players who are spending time crafting and upgrading higher tier weapons should have a bit more of an advantage, and the Stitcher 4 was just shredding just a bit too much. The Kettle was in a very similar spot. Embark intended this weapon to be more of a medium range, kind of slower paced weapon, and what they found is that a lot of Kettle engagements were essentially mag dumping and using it as a close quarters SMG. In order to distinguish it from the Stitcher, the Kettle has had its base damage reduced from 10 down to 8.5. However, they did leave the headshot multiplier the same, that way they can push players to go for more headshots using that gun. The Venator is interesting. Despite its last nerf, Embark found that a lot of fights were still dominated by this gun. Anecdotally, I saw them very infrequently after the nerf, but they have the data that backs up their claim. In order to push players to have more diversity with the guns they bring into fights, the Venator has had another nerf. Its headshot multiplier has been reduced from 2.5 down to 2, and its base damage has been reduced from 9 down to 8. I suspect this might be too much of a nerf, especially with its base damage, and given that it is a bit more expensive to craft, I just don't know if I'll see a lot more Venators compared to Stitchers and Kettles. And here's where weapon balancing really got interesting. 2 legendary weapons have now been overhauled in an effort to see them be a lot more viable for PvP fights. The Jupiter's ADS magnification has been improved from about 1.9 times zoom to 2.2 times zoom, making it a lot more effective at long ranges. And its equip times and unequip times have been improved as well. The equip time has moved from 1.2 seconds down to 1.05 seconds, and its unequip time has moved from 0.9 seconds to 0.75 seconds. This is good for if you're using the Jupiter, end up in a close quarters fight, shoot, and then have to swap to your second weapon. But I think there's a real opportunity here to do something grander in scope. A lot of people have been pretty unhappy with the current state of the skill tree. There's a lot of claims that I agree with, that a lot of these skills are pretty marginal. Introducing a skill in the future, like the time it takes to swap weapons, could be something interesting to add later on, instead of the onus being placed on the handling of a specific weapon. The Aphelion was designed as a PvP-focused legendary weapon, but you did not see a lot of Aphelions going around in PvP fights. So in order to sway people to use it as more of a PvP gun, the base reload time has been reduced from 4.5 seconds to 3.5 seconds. The time between shots has been reduced as well from 0.9 to 0.7. The vertical recoil has been reduced by 50%, and the ADS settle spread has been improved by 35%. This has some potential, especially in some of the bigger maps like Blue Gate, where you're in a lot of like medium to long range fights. This could be a good option to bring in, but for the crafting cost, I feel like a Renegade still might be a better option. Maybe this will shine in some kind of buried city raid where a lot of fights take place on rooftops. Time will tell. Next, we got some changes to items and crafting. One of the most important ones is the change to energy clips, which are now available by default in the standard workbench. Previously, you would need to find either a legendary weapon or a legendary weapon blueprint from the Harvester event in order to be able to craft energy clip ammo in the workbench. But now everyone has access to it, which I think is good. And here is where things start getting really controversial, specifically with item value changes, cost changes, and crafting requirements. Up first is the deadline. Its value has increased from 5,000 coins to 6,000, so it'll sell at a bit higher rate. However, it also costs more to buy from traders. The price has increased from 15,000 up to 18,000. They've also added a new arc part as a crafting cost, and this is really the thesis for a lot of crafting components. Embark is really pushing for the economy of loot to be placed on a lot of arc components. Arc parts now sell at a lower value in order to encourage using them for crafting and progression uses. You'll now need to kill the new Comet arc in order to use the igniter to craft a deadline mine. The Trailblazer is another grenade that got some changes. Its value has increased from 1,600 up to 2,200, and its trader price has also increased from 4,800 to 6,600. You'll need to kill the new Firefly arc in order to start crafting Trailblazer grenades. And here's the notorious one. The Wolfpack has had what I think is a pretty substantial nerf. Its value has increased from 5,000 to 6,000. They've reduced the refined explosive cost to craft these, but they've added a Rocketeer driver as a crafting cost. There is some pros and cons to this. I think the thing that really sucks about this is that the Wolfpack is the only explosive that requires epic tier loot in order to craft. Not even the deadline requires that, and I'd consider the deadline a lot deadlier, pardon the pun. Not only are deadlines stronger, but they can also be bought from traders, which currently you can't do from Wolfpacks either. and these sell for the same price to traders. The cost benefit there between deadlines and wolf packs just isn't that good. A lot of people have also noted that sometimes wolf packs end up being duds if you accidentally end up a little bit outside of range, not to mention the dispersion of them if there's any nearby arc, making your main target take significantly less damage, and that it takes 2 wolf packs to take down a single Rocketeer, and the drop rate for Rocketeer drivers was already reduced significantly in one of the earlier patches. Wolf packs used to be one of the main ways to take out Rocketeers. It's just not a viable option anymore, given the cost to make them. The inverse, and this is the only pro, I think, with this change, is that during an electromagnetic storm, you'll see significantly more husks around the map which you can breach and search. Included in that is Rocketeer husks, and the chances of finding Rocketeer drivers goes up during those electromagnetic events. I suspect that Embark really wants you playing in that gameplay loop, ongoing on loot runs before going on a separate raid to take out large arc. I think if Embark wants to stick to their guns with this Wolfpack change, then they might need to rethink the drop rate for Rocketeer drivers from destroyed Rocketeers. Alright, the Vita Spray has had its value increased from 3,000 to 3,400, and they've also added Tick Pod as a crafting cost to make these. Similarly, the Showstopper has had its value decreased from 2,200 to 2,100, and they've added a Hornet driver as a crafting cost to make these. The one change that I like with the Showstoppers is that they've changed the crafting component from the advanced electrical components down to the regular electrical components in order to make these. Now let's move on to content and bug fixes. We won't go over every single line, as some of these are small tunes and various animation fixes, but we will hit a bunch of the highlights. One of the biggest ones is that they fixed an issue where fall damage wouldn't get applied if the player was in a knockback animation. They've fixed an issue where surveyors and fireballs could open prematurely before stabilizing. They've also reduced the erratic movement of arc parts when they are stuck to a looted item. Hornets now keep their upper armor after being destroyed, making the lootable pieces easier to distinguish from wasps. They've also fixed an issue where the Rocketeer sometimes would not shoot despite having a clear view of its target. Great. Are Rocketeers the worst arc? And they've also reduced the cases where the Sentinel's shot could pass through geometry when its weapon clips into the walls at very close range. There's a couple of audio fixes as well. They've reduced audio stuttering on lower spec PCs. They fixed an issue where sliding on stairs or debris could cause audio stutters. Scrappy, our boy, has received feedback that he's being too noisy and will now cluck less frequently. Bro got nerfed. Birds perched on ziplines now screech with correct positional audio when startled, and they've updated acoustic guitar music tracks. As far as gameplay changes, they've added a piano as an interactable object in the world. There's a bunch in Buried City, but there's also one in the cultural archives of Stellamontis if you want to hit the keys. They've fixed an issue where interactions could be triggered from too far away, allowing players to open doors, start hatches, or loot items without actually being nearby. Hold and continuous interactions now cancel when equipping another item or weapon. This supposedly completely nerfed the snap hook technique, but I think the biggest bummer is that you can no longer open your inventory while breaching and searching a container, which I used to do pretty frequently. They fixed an issue where players could become unable to move after being revived with a defib. They've also prevented players from standing on or being carried by throwing grenades and other non-walkable items. For controller players, they also added missing gamepad aim assists for sentinels, turrets, shredders, and surveyors, making it a bit easier to kill. They've disabled queuing for practice range while in a party to prevent matchmaking errors. And they fixed an issue where a downed raider's body could block hatch extraction by triggering a search prompt. You can now make purchases with seeds and free loadout augments, even if your stash is overflowing. And last, they've prevented enabling all NVIDIA freestyle filters simultaneously to remove an unfair visual advantage, which was huge. A lot of very sweaty players were able to take advantage of this. They would make their game disgustingly ugly and had extremely high visibility in any sort of night raid or dark interior. There's been some changes to the various maps. Buried City got kind of an annoying nerf. The chance of finding rare loot in chimneys has now been lowered slightly during Bird City map conditions, which I don't know, I guess why would you do that? Bird City And it's kind of the whole point of Bird City to find these rare ducks, and you're already not finding a crazy amount of them to begin with, making Bird City loot runs almost pointless, I feel. Stellamontes got a couple of changes. They fixed multiple collision issues in lobby, atrium, loading bay, train station tunnels, and seed vault to prevent players from reaching out-of-bounds areas using the unstuck function, and to address shots coming from the lobby ceiling, which I think is very huge. They've also adjusted night lighting on Stellamontes to improve visibility in darker areas, and they've improved nighttime visibility at the seed vault extraction by adding local lighting. Less chances to get ratted there. And they've fixed an issue that allowed players to get on top of metro trains. Bluegate got some improved thunderstorm lighting for better visual clarity, and they've also fixed an issue where players could go out of bounds in the Bluegate tunnels. Movement got 2 fixes. They've adjusted ladder jump off to match the vaulting jump off behavior, and they've fixed an issue where sliding could clip through stairs and escalators. Progression got a couple of updates. You can now reroll feats 3 times per day for free. So if you're someone who's trying to get some creds and don't like the current feats, you can reroll them. They've also completely removed the PvP feats, updated a few existing feats, and added a few new ones. Again, pushing more people toward that PvE aspect of the game. Of course, they added the expedition catch-up system for those who missed skill points from the first expedition. And the candleberries in Bluegate now count toward the Harvest Plants trial. Finally. And now that we're basically in spring, this finally counts. For quests, they've added clearer ping labels for quest-related world objects to improve readability, and they've fixed an issue where the next object pop-up in multi-step quests could be missing or show a completed step. It now consistently displays the correct upcoming objective. Some social and UI changes. When playing in a party, map selection now shows all locations unlocked by the member with the most rounds played. They've fixed an issue where previous teammates could appear in the social tab in proximity list after starting a new session. They've fixed friends appearing offline when they have more than one platform linked, and this one's for streamers, I think. They've added the ability to hide friend requests. UI got a bunch of changes. Item pings for items and containers now appear above the container's interaction point and no longer appear at the wrong location in certain containers. They've added a ready up warning when deploying with a raider hatch key into a map with no active hatches, which I think is huge. They've added icons to inventory tooltips to show recycle and salvage outputs. This is great. You can just hover over an item and see exactly what it will recycle into. You can now use the mouse scroll wheel to switch between pages in the Raider deck. Just a nice quality of life change. They've improved the red zipline preview when the zipline cannot be properly placed. Crafting and recycling screens now display item costs and rewards in a consistent order for easier reading. This one isn't noted, but they also updated the Scrappy UI. The page looks different, and a small quality of life change that I think is overlooked is that the starting position when you tab over to the page using controller is no longer on that claim button. You used to be able to just tab over to Scrappy and quickly claim all the craftable materials. Now, the position of the reticle starts on the first crafting material, meaning you have to click down to the claim button and then press it. It's such a tiny thing, but it is one additional click that used to not be there. And last, the VoIP icon in the HUD will now better visually represent if the microphone is going to transmit or not, if you're using push to talk or toggle to talk. There's some utility changes as well. Pop triggers and spotter relays can now be used in quick slots. The shaker instrument can now be crafted while in raid. They've adjusted Vita sprays so healing applies continuously while in use to prevent exploit cases. Ziplines can no longer be placed on carryable objects. Mines, traps, and remote flares can no longer be placed on ziplines or on other small deployables. And the tactical healing augment now correctly states that the healing is applied instantly. And last is this note on anti-cheat. In short, Embark has heard the feedback that there's just far too many cheaters in the game and that the respective punishments were not strong enough. Serious infractions now carry stricter consequences, so we might now be seeing more permanent bans be a lot more consistent. And those are your patch notes for Arc Raiders in the 1.17 patch. Let me know what you think of the changes. Is the Rocketeer nerf that big a deal? I don't know, I kind of think it is. And how are we feeling about the weapon balancing? Let me know down in the comments. Until next time, Raider, we'll see you in the next one.